how are you doing? I hope you're having a lovely day so far. I am so excited to sit down with a cup of tea and chat with you in today's video. I have recently read my first ever 6-star read. I absolutely loved it, can't wait to chat about it later. And it has inspired me to share with you some of my top bookish recommendations. There's so many things I've been loving recently, from audiobooks to content creators to of course the books themselves, lots of different authors, and I can't wait to dive into all of those today. I know that when I first started really getting into reading, pretty much at the start of the year actually, when I got back into reading, I was really looking for top recommendations. I think it's really helpful, or hopefully it will be in this video, but generally for me, the recommendations I've got have been so helpful to have, and they're how I've found most of my favourite books, most of the books that I'm recommending today. So I thought I'd get cosy, make a cup of tea and chat through all of my bookish favourites. Hopefully if you're new to reading or just love reading in general, you might hopefully pick up a couple of bookish recommendations today. So let's start with books, because I have been so lucky to read so many amazing books this year that have been 5 stars, and of course the one 6-star that I'm going to mention as well. There's a real mix of genres in the list that I'm going to give you today. So there's fantasy, romance, also historical fiction, thriller. So I've been very lucky to find 5 stars in each of those genres. And firstly, I wanted to talk about a series that I've been absolutely loving, which is the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. This is a fantasy series. It's so magical. When I was reading it, I really did feel completely immersed in this magical world, which I think is a really good sign of a fantasy book, when you just feel like you can really picture and imagine the world whilst you're reading it. The first book in this series is actually the first ever fantasy book that I have read start to finish. I loved it so much that I went straight on to book 2, and I can't wait to read book 3. I picked it up the other day and I'm so excited to read it. So the first book in the series follows Evangeline Fox, as does the second, but the first book opens with Evangeline making a deal with the Prince of Hearts. She's trying to stop the man that she loves from marrying her stepsister, but the deal that she made there comes with a lot of consequences that lead to a very twisty turny read, where it finishes in book 1, picks straight up from there in book 2, and then book 2 is the most twisty turny book ever. It is so fast paced. I was just so hooked on both of these books. And also I would say about this one, it would be a great introduction, like it was for me, to the fantasy world, because the world building is so easy to follow. That's sometimes what I find a bit daunting, or have found a bit daunting previously, about starting fantasy books. I felt like maybe it would take me too long to get into the world or to understand the world, and so that's why I've always gravitated to other genres. But this one is such a good introduction because the world building is so well done, so easy to follow, and so I just didn't feel intimidated at all by having to remember too much in terms of the world. Also, I think it helps that Evangeline was also learning about the world kind of at a similar time that we were. The world building also, I said world building so many times, but the world building felt very natural. So definitely a really good series to start your fantasy reading. Also, the magic in this book was really unpredictable, so we didn't know all of the ways that the magic works as the book was going on. So when that unpredictability would come into play, the magic in the book can really affect the plot in ways that you don't expect. So a really good series, and I can't wait to read the 3rd book. Next up is one that I read on my Kindle. It is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I read this one just before I went on my trip to Ireland, and it was the perfect time to read it because I was looking for a book by an Irish author set in Ireland, and being such a fan of the series, I felt like it was the perfect one to read at that time. Also, because I'm a fan of the series, it felt so nostalgic to read. I just love Marianne and Connell and their relationship, so reading how that was originally written in the book was such kind of quite a nostalgic experience, because it felt like I was revisiting those characters that I really like. Whilst the series is really true to the book, which was also nice to see, there are some things that maybe just didn't quite make it into the series, so it felt like I was experiencing new parts of the characters as well, which I really like. So this book, for those of you who might not have seen the series or read the book, is one that follows Marianne and Connell's relationship from school right into university, and then kind of just after university as well. There are lots of themes discussed, whether it's family dynamics or their relationship of course itself, miscommunication. There's also them growing individually as well and figuring out what they want out of life. There's a lot of really interesting themes throughout the book. There were so many lines in the book as well that I annotated that I thought was so well written. I just felt like it was really honest writing. I felt very much like I had such a deep sense of the characters throughout. It was really interesting because in the series we see a lot of the miscommunication, and we obviously know how they're both individually feeling, but in the book I feel like you, with those extra thoughts that you're reading from each of the characters, it goes even deeper, which I didn't think was possible because the series is so good in that way. But you got an even deeper sense, I felt like, of the characters because of those extra thoughts and feelings that were written in from Marianne and Connell. So such a good read if you're looking for the romance. And if you've also not watched the series, you're in for a treat. I feel like read Normal People and then go straight into watching the series and it'll be a great experience. Next up is an ultimate favourite of mine that I've talked about many a time. It is The Couple at Number 9 by Claire Douglas, and also Claire Douglas in general because she has become such a reliable author to me. She's definitely one of my favourite authors out there in the thriller genre. So the story starts with Safi and Tom, who move into Safi's grandmother's house, and while there's been work going on in the house, they essentially find two bodies buried in the garden, and it's from there that we kind of investigate what's happened. Is Safi's grandmother involved in some way? And the investigation starts from there. It's told across lots of different timelines and perspectives, some in first person, some in third person. There's lots of different ways that perspectives are delivered throughout this book, which I really enjoy when that happens, because I feel like in a thriller in particular it just adds to that feeling of me being hooked and also me not knowing what to expect from chapter to chapter. The character development also happens directly alongside the plot developing, which I also always really love. That's one of my favourite aspects of a thriller when it's written that way, because then the pacing still feels really fast and gripping, but with the character development happening alongside it, it means that when those twists and turns happen, which they really do in this book, you kind of feel them even more because you really have an understanding of the characters and how they might react to those twists and turns. Like I said, the twists and turns, incredible. I absolutely loved it. I've recommended this book to anybody who has asked for a good recommendation. Quite a few people from my family have already read this because I have given it to them all. Definitely one of the best thrillers that I have read this year. Next up is another one from my Kindle, which I absolutely loved. It is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Now this was my first historical fiction that I ever picked up. I was so glad that I did. This story follows two sisters in France in World War II at the time where Germany invaded France. One of the sisters' focus at the time is essentially surviving and looking after and protecting her family. The other sister's focus is very much on helping other people and getting them to safety. So they both have slightly different experiences of the war, and because of that, and also because of how much research I really felt went into this book, I felt like even though this was obviously a fictional book, I learned so much and there were so many takeaways, and I felt like that's what I would have wanted from a historical fiction, so I was really glad to get that from this book. And honestly, if you're looking for historical fiction, I just could not recommend this one enough. It's quite an emotional read, as you probably would expect. It's just so brilliantly researched. I'm actually just about to start today another historical fiction from Kristen Hanna called The Women, which I have heard many a good thing about. Many people have recommended that, and I'm sure if I had finished reading that, it would also have been in this video. But Kristen Hanna is somebody who I believe has written quite a few books in the historical fiction genre, so I think she would be a really good author to start with if you're looking to get into that genre. Okay, it's finally time to talk about my 6-star read. It was so good. It's A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This book was recommended to me. I'm so glad it was. I just finished it last night and I feel like I knew from about halfway through that this was going to be a 6-star read for me. It follows Pippa, also known as Pip, who is a teenager. She is doing a project at school, and in the project essentially she could pick any topic that she wanted, and she decided to pick a murder that happened locally about 5 years previous. It's a closed case, but Pip has some doubts about who everybody thinks the murderer is. She's not quite sure she believes that that is correct. There's so many things that I loved about this book that it's almost hard to know where to start, but I really liked the main character Pip. She was really interesting. She had quite a unique personality in a great way. I liked how determined she was to not give up on this investigation and to figure out what actually happened. And because of her personality, I felt like she was really keen to speak to people, and so the pace felt really fast because we weren't waiting around. Pip wasn't waiting around. We were going straight to the people and interviewing them and talking to them, so the pacing just felt really fast. Another thing that I absolutely loved, and I think this is why I gave it a 6-star read actually, was the amount of different writing formats that were included in this book. So here you've got an interview that's written out, like a transcript of the interview. You've also got the production log entries where Pip is jotting down all of her thoughts and feelings along the way. There's also text messages. It's just so many writing elements are used in this, and I found that so gripping and so interesting, and it's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more later when I recommend audiobooks, because it has one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to, and I think it's because of that structure it really lent itself to being just a brilliant audiobook. Could not recommend this one more. It is such a page turner. The main character, so likeable. The pacing, so quick. It was so good, honestly. If I could recommend any book from this video, I mean, I'd recommend them all, but I'd especially recommend this one. Okay, well, it feels like a good time now that I have recommended that to recommend to you some of my favourite audiobooks. So a couple of these audiobooks overlap from some of my favourite books, probably unsurprisingly, but I'll start with a couple that I haven't mentioned yet, so let me pick it up. The first one is Carla by Colin Walsh, and the reason I'm recommending this audiobook so highly is that the book is very much written in a style that feels like how our main characters would speak, and so I felt like the reason I loved the audiobook so much is because I could really hear the characters very clearly through the audiobook. So it really added to my sense of the characters, which is a running theme throughout all of the audiobooks that I'm going to recommend, and it also just helps the book flow very nicely. The book itself is based around a friendship group and is based specifically around their friend Carla, who went missing, and it has a dual timeline, so we look at modern day and also at the summer where Carla went missing. The book overall I gave 3.5 stars, and I think one of my favourite aspects that went into that rating was the audiobook. Next up is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. The audiobook was equally as great because it gave me a deep sense of the character. It was also the first book that I immersive read with, so if you've watched any of my videos you'll likely know I'm a real fan of immersive reading, where you listen to the audiobook at the same time as reading the physical copy. I feel like because of that the audiobook just has a special place in my heart because it was the first book that I tried immersive reading with, which I now absolutely love. This is a cosy small town romance. I feel like this would be a good one actually in September when Gilmore Girls season really begins because it'll give you those cozy small town vibes, the same vibes as Gilmore Girls essentially. I was saying in a previous video, this series in general is definitely a bit more mature than Gilmore Girls at times, but the backdrop and the context is very much Gilmore Girls vibes. Another one was Wild Love by Elsie Silver, and this series in general. In a way this is kind of similar vibes to The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. It is a 3-book series so far, maybe it's a 4-book series actually now. I can't quite remember, but there's a couple of books in this series anyway. I've read the first 2. Each book focuses around 2 characters and their romance, and it is all set against the backdrop of the place called Rose Hill. I wanted to mention this one for similar reasons, in that the audiobook gave me a real sense of the characters. I really like an audiobook when the book is written from the characters' perspective themselves, and this one was. We flick between the 2 main characters, Ford and Rosie, in this book, and their thoughts and feelings, and I think it really it works well in an audiobook because often there are two voice actors, two narrators who are reading the book. So you essentially feel like it's the two main characters talking to you, and I really like that experience. Next is the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. Absolutely loved this. I actually listened to this audiobook for both of the books at work and I did not stop listening all day. I absolutely loved the experience of listening to it. I felt completely immersed in the world, and I think actually, like I was talking about the world building earlier, I think the audiobook really helped with that sense of world building. I just really enjoyed this book in general, and the audiobook was a big part of my reading experience, so I really felt I had to mention this one. Back to my 6-star read. The reason why I loved the audiobook for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder so much is because, like I mentioned, the different writing elements that were included throughout this book really fed into how the audiobook was read. The production on the audiobook was unbelievable. She'd make a phone call and you'd hear the phone tapping and ringing, and then you'd hear the noise in the background as she was talking to whoever she was talking to. The audiobook production was just unbelievable. I've never listened to an audiobook like this before. It made me completely immersed in the world and in the experience that Pip was going throughout this book. Even to the point when I mentioned that there were text messages in this book earlier, you'd hear typing as if you were hearing Pip type the messages, and it was just unbelievable. If I had to rate the audiobook alone, I'd rate it 6 stars, so I absolutely loved the experience of listening to it. 10 out of 10, 6 stars. Loved everything about this book, including the audiobook. Okay, now it's time to chat about a couple of my favourite content creators. The bookish community, I feel like, is such a lovely space to be in. I love creating content and I love watching content as well. I feel like there's so many great content creators, and I'm going to leave a full list in the description because there are a lot of content creators out there that I really enjoy following, so I'll leave a full list in the description. But I wanted to make sure to mention a couple in this video, and the first is Sara Carrolli. She is one of the first bookish content creators I ever followed. She is somebody who really got me back into reading. I absolutely love her videos. The way she talks about books just makes you really excited to read them. I just love the things that she picks up along the way while she's reading a book to share with you. I think she picks up really interesting points. Hearing those points as she's reading it just makes me want to read it even more. She is just such a brilliant content creator. I'm sure if you are in the bookish community you will have heard of her and love her content as equally as I do, so I wanted to make sure to mention her in today's video. Next is Liza Palmer, who is just one of the loveliest people that you will ever meet, and her content is equally as great. Each of her videos feels like you're chatting with a friend. She makes really brilliant content that feels very cozy and comforting, and I always love her videos, whether that be on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, and as I said, she's the loveliest person, so I would 100% recommend her videos if you don't already follow her already. Next up are two content creators that I found or came across on TikTok, and I've absolutely loved their content since. They're also on other platforms as well, I'll leave all the links in the description, but they are Coven and Silly Little Books. I love both of their content so much. Every time a video of theirs comes across my TikTok page, I'm always really glad to see it. I always stop and watch the whole thing. I love the recommendations that they both give, their cozy, comforting vibes. I just love both of their content, so they are big recommendations for me. I also have a couple of podcast recommendations, but I love them all for exactly the same reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave them in the description box and put them up on screen now. A couple of my favourite podcast recommendations. I love them all because when I'm not listening to an audiobook in the car or when I'm getting ready, it's really nice to put a podcast on, and it's still, because I love books so much, it's still really nice to have that bookish theme to them, and each of these podcasts is really chatty and lovely, gets me excited about reading. There's some real funny moments as well. I really enjoy all of them, and each episode of the bookish podcasts that I go back to listening to is always one that I enjoy. So those are all my top bookish recommendations for now. I'm sure this will be a list that just continues to grow, and I will update you as that list grows. those. But for now, there are a couple of my bookish favourites. If you've read or listened to any of these books, I would love to hear your thoughts on them, and I would also love to hear your recommendations, because as I have said in this video, half of these books are based on books that have been recommended, and because of that I have found so many good reads, so please do recommend more. I would also love to hear any content creators that you love or podcasts that you follow, or just any bookish favourites in general. I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I've really enjoyed sitting with a cup of tea and chatting all things books, so I hope you've enjoyed being here, and I will see you very soon with a new video.